Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on this show, we're bringing back Johannes Schickling. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Yeah, it's been forever, I think, since we had the pleasure last time together. But I'm very stoked to be showing you some of the stuff I've been working on recently, and there's certainly a few parallels that we'll dive in. So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. You're always working on something cool. And I guess before we dive into what you're doing now, let's get a little background. So, for folks who aren't familiar with your work, do you want to kind of bring us up to date on who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in web development for quite a little while. I started out when PHP 4 was a thing, so that's many years ago. And slowly but surely, I found my way into the wonderful world of JavaScript.
Mm,
And so while building various projects, products, startups, I've basically gotten more and more pleasure of making the journey as worthwhile as possible, and a lot of that for engineers meant improving developer experience. And there were always like a few deeper pockets of like DX friction,
hmm.
and so the one developer friction pocket that I've spent most of my professional life on is around database tooling. And so that led to me founding a company in 2016. Back then it was called GraphCool, and eventually that became Prisma. So I've been, I had the great privilege together with my co-founder and now with quite a sizable company to take a stab at solving um, or trying to solve the like a great development workflow around working with databases as
Hmm.
part of Prisma. And so maybe that's probably not known in a too public way. But last year, I had the opportunity to take a sabbatical, which just like as a founder, I think that's a fairly common thing to do after some period of time to just like take a step back. Not always like you have the opportunity, but I had the opportunities. And Prisma is in a really great state where we've just brought
Mm.
in a great leadership team. And so yeah, in that period of time for me, I really had like a bit more capacity again to get my own hands dirty again, and just wanted to go back to building things myself.
Yeah.
And that is what I've been doing for quite a while now. And I've went back to building projects, building little products, and wanted to learn as much as possible of like what has changed in the last. I mean, there's no like having started Prisma, I was like more than 6 years ago, and a lot of things have changed since then.
Hmm.
And we've been always building products and tools for developers, but
Right.
I'm kind of like envying the developers who can use them, and I couldn't use it really myself, so now I can again. And so while using it, I've also experienced other friction points when building products and using some tools. And especially when building websites. And what's important about websites is like that they try to communicate some information that's typically in the form of content,
Hmm.
as opposed to applications dealing a lot with data. But like one form of data is content, is a specific form of data. And turns out there is also a lot of friction around working with content, especially in combination with more modern site frameworks such as Next, where you just
Hmm.
have to do a surprising amount of like rolling sort of content pipelines yourself.
Right.
And I while building a website, I again went in a rabbit hole and tried to like improve my own workflows, and ended up building a little tool that turned out to be useful for others as well. And this eventually became what was released a few weeks ago as Contentlayer. And
Hmm.
so that's one of the things I've been working on over the last while, and what I want to like show you today, and help you get to use it and build a little thing with it. So I think that would be fun for today's session.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a blast. And so to kind of get like our heads around why Contentlayer exists. I feel like you did a good lead up here. I want to share something that's been frustrating for me lately, which is I feel like one of the things that I love the most when I'm working as a developer is the like the docs as code workflow or content as code. I like to write blog posts in Markdown or MDX, and the ability to just kind of commit a blog post. I push that to GitHub, and then I know it's going to go live on my site is wonderful. But as you said, especially with things like Markdown, there's a surprising amount of having to roll your own pipeline to make that work, because when you use a CMS like Sanity or Contentful or Strappy and any of these, right, Headless WordPress, they're so good at this content input, the content management, right? You log into a UI, it's a beautiful UI, you make changes, commit those changes, and then I've got an API endpoint, I pull that content in, all wonderful. But like if I'm working on a doc site, I can't give everybody access to the CMS. Like we want community contributions. We want people to be able to weigh in and give us, small typo fixes or things like that they're just like, oh, if I could, I would fix that really quickly. But instead I have to like DM somebody and they got to put it on a roadmap and figure out when they're going to find time to go into the CMS to make this typo fix. So there's this efficiency thing with working directly in the code with Markdown and things like that. But I have such a different relationship developing with Markdown. Like I hate it. I hate developing with Markdown or with MDX. I love writing in it. I hate working with it. And it creates this tension because I don't necessarily want everything I do to be running on a CMS. But if I want to build quickly, I absolutely want to use a CMS for the building of the site, because I like this idea of I get content and that content is an object and I can just use it. And there's API endpoints for getting all the stuff I need. Whereas with Markdown, I'm like, okay, well now I got to like figure out what library is actually going to let me load these files and then parse them. And then how do I get the front matter out? Okay, but what if I need to do like transformation on the front? I just did this yesterday. I have the Learn with JSON site is built in Remix, and they have a pipeline that I like copy pasted some Mackenzie Dodds' code to load the MDX files, but then I wanted to transform the metadata so that I could like generate social images. So I had to build this utility file that would like read the MDX file into memory and then parse all this stuff. And I was like, man, this is a lot of work. Like this would be so much easier if I was just using a content management system. But I hate writing, and like I want to write my blog posts as code. And so this is the pain that I've been feeling. And one of the reasons I got so excited when you started talking about Contentlayer is that it sounds like the promise of this, from what I'm reading on the site, is that you've found a way to give me that experience of like my Markdown is effectively an endpoint. I'm pulling it in. I have access to my front matter. I have access to all the data as if I was loading it from an API, but I can write it as code. Is that correct?
Exactly. And there's like so many little threads that you've like spread throughout like the last few minutes that I would love to pull on, since even with sort of more polished experiences, let's say Sanity or Contentful, etc. While the editing experience, like for the content editing experiences, is obviously worth a lot. The experience for a developer actually integrating it, there's also like tons of little like paper cuts that you hurt yourself with.
Right.
So there is it might be less so that there's just like this big wall that you can't overcome and like you just can't get it to work. You can get it to work, but then there's just like tons of little small annoying things that make you spend time on it, or just you don't have a great time. So for example, live reload is something we got to love as developers, especially in the JavaScript ecosystem. But then when you change your content and you want to see it like live in your page, since like it's not just like any page, you don't just hand out Google Docs to people, but you want to make it look and feel like your blog, your documentation, your whatever. So you want to see it in that context, and then you need to like reload the page, and then like that triggers off like all like the server-side rendering, and just it kills sort of the feedback cycle. And that's something I value very highly, is like getting into the flow of like content writing, getting into the flow of development. And it's all about the feedback cycle. It should be all like very smooth and very like, you should just be in that flow. And I try to see like whatever are these little things that could just make it a delight to use, and lets you focus on like building your web experience, writing that content. That's sort of like the influencing theme of Contentlayer. And it really, the devil's in the detail, and there's many little devils depending on like where the content is coming from. And so there are various variations. And I think today we'll mostly take a look at like Markdown or MDX. MDX is sort of like a wild beast and is kind of a bit undefined anyway. There's now like version 2, which is great, but there's still a lot of open questions generally around like how to work with MDX. So Contentlayer has like its own take that tries to incorporate as many best practices that sort of emerged over time.
Gotcha.
But yeah, let's dig into that as we go.
Yeah. And so before I flip over to code, just a couple more questions around this, because I think this is always fascinating, right? So you mentioned you were one of the co-founders of Prisma, and we've talked about Prisma on the show before. I can share a couple links for folks so that we have those available. But one of the things that is interesting about Prisma, and one of the reasons that I think we're starting to see Prisma show up in so many stacks, is that it takes this idea of data access and removes the need for me as a developer to know the difference between accessing MySQL versus accessing Postgres versus accessing, any other flavor of database or things like that. And then gives me the ability to kind of have one unified way of thinking about databases. I write the Prisma schema, I use Prisma's migrations, and I get TypeScript autocomplete. I get, the guarantee that things work the way they are. I have a kind of a standardized API, and that feels really nice to use. And if for y'all in the chat who have tried this, if you go and build with a site that's a stack using Prisma and it uses MySQL, and you decide you want to spin up Prisma instead, or like you want to use Postgres, or like you find one that's using Postgres and you want to try out PlanetScale, which uses MySQL, swapping it out is like one config file, instead of having to back it out of every single file that's importing the MySQL connector or the Postgres connector. It really does create this nice abstraction of we're working with data. And did y'all land on like, is Prisma an ORM or is it something else?
So I think that's mostly nomenclature. So
Yeah.
there is factually there is a definition of like that some people came up with what an ORM is, and by that definition we've tried to be very correct early on. And by that definition, Prisma is kind of not an ORM, but eventually we kind of just gave in and saw that people think about it like that.
Sure.
And let's just not be like too factually correct, but let's just, if people think about it like in that box, it's still like the biggest worry for us has been that ORMs had a really bad rep.
Right.
And because there's just arguably a lot of like building one that's really great is really hard, and most previous attempts have just stopped halfway there. And we've been also a bit worried about like that people would just not take it serious if we would use that term. But
Yeah.
I think by now we've really got the trust of developers, and they see like, holy moly, like I didn't like ORMs before, but this is something I'm actually using in my production app. So and to bring it back to Contentlayer, it's kind of funny because a lot of the similar, I've talked about it like broadly from like trying to come up with a great developer experience and solve these friction points. And Contentlayer, you can kind of think about it like as Prisma, but for content. So there's a lot of similarities. Also just as a disclaimer, this is really just like a project I'm working on. There is no intent to build a company based on Contentlayer similar to Prisma. So this is really something to solve my own pain points, and I thought it would be useful to others as well. And eventually, like I ended up building as I worked on this project, turned out there was a company I'm actually advising. It's called Stackbit, and turned out that this would be actually also a useful thing for them that's strategically relevant to their users.
Right.
So they ended up like really materially sponsoring that work, and that allowed me also to spend a bit more time on it.
Cool. That's extremely cool. And yeah, so when you take the all the learning that you've had from Prisma, and we know that the thing that makes Prisma uniquely valuable is this normalization over working with databases, which were traditionally, you know, it was, you had to be like a database expert, not expert, but you had to have more knowledge than you maybe wanted to be able to work with a given database. Prisma's made it so that a front-end developer with enough knowledge to be able to spin up a database can now work with any database. Like if you can get into Google Cloud or AWS or whatever. You might not even need the knowledge to
spin it up. You might just need to go to like DigitalOcean or PlanetScale and clickety-clack, and now you have like a connection string. That's all you need.
That's a really good point. I mean, we're really flattening the playing field, and I think that tools like Prisma do part of this big power up, I would say, of we saw a lot of talk in the past about this idea of a full stack developer. And I think that people who have been developing for a long time, we all kind of brush that off as hyperbolic, because we would say, there's no such thing as a full stack developer. Like, nobody can learn all of this stuff. You can be a little bit good at all of these things, but you'll never be a deep expert, right? And what I've noticed is that with tools like Prisma and tools like Netlify, tools that basically abstract over the pieces of the backend that are commoditizable, we can actually, like a front-end developer, a solid front-end developer with a little bit of node knowledge can accomplish what a full stack developer would claim.
Exactly.
Because they can build full apps. Like, you can build really hardcore full apps that'll scale to whatever, that are runnable on virtually any infrastructure. It's really incredible how much you can get done as a single developer with tools like Prisma. So how much of that is, I know you're saying that the Contentlayer is not intended to be a company, so it's not going to get the same level of investment that Prisma got. But when you're talking about, like, is this just a logical next step, where if Prisma is about low-level database access, Contentlayer is about, all the things that get built on top of databases and need normalization again?
So I wouldn't say it's like this is like clearly step one, this is step two.
Sure.
I would rather say that this was just like work that hasn't been done yet in the ecosystem, and everyone kept like rolling their own thing.
Sure.
I would say Contentlayer in itself, even though it has, it can be and should be expanded way more broadly to different content sources, etc. I think the magnitude of like a problem that it's trying to solve is quite more manageable and quite a bit smaller than like Prisma is really like a monumental effort. And even though it has seen now years of like really solid engineering and development, there's still like we're kind of like just getting started with all of the things that that Prisma wants to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So I think these are really like two domains. Like, maybe you want to build an app, then you deal with data, so you're using Prisma, and maybe you build a site where you're dealing with content, and this is where Contentlayer can maybe be helpful. So
Yeah.
I think it's mostly been just like I couldn't help it, and I couldn't leave that problem be unsolved. So I applied my previous wisdom to like have a step at that. And I mean, you've personally, I think, have also like a very interesting relationship to it, given your history at Gatsby.
Mm-hmm.
Since I think Gatsby has pioneered this path really, really well, and has done such a great job of like really figuring out some of these development patterns, etc. And I think it's a fantastic tool for like building out sites that especially combine like different sources of content, etc.
Right.
And I think has seen a lot of traction. For my taste, Gatsby has always felt a little bit more like a big cannon for like small for like smaller things. And so I typically rather like try to see how far could I get with something like Next.js or something more nimble. But there, in Next.js, for example, you really have to do all of this yourself.
Right.
And this is where I try to basically have like a mini version of like what are the great parts about Gatsby, as like made that standalone available, and that's what Contentlayer is.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean that's a good I think a great overview of how it works, and probably from here anything else I ask would just be easier to show. So let me switch us over to the pair programming view, and I'm gonna probably have to fix this real quick. I am. Give me just a second because I broke all sorts of things. Let me get this.
In the meanwhile, I can also, like, for everyone interested, feel free to also check out the Contentlayer website. We've put that online a few weeks ago, and we've really tried with that website to make it as educational as possible, and also like very interactive, so that you can like get the ideas how it's working. And we've actually, if you're on Chrome or in Firefox, you can actually have like a real life project that uses Contentlayer embedded in the website itself, so you can get a feel for it. It's kind of Inception, where you have like a full IDE in your website. So you can try changing some content there, or changing a bit of like the next app, and you see like in real time refresh. So if you're too lazy, like a lot of people, and me included, to actually really like create a new project, set everything up, and you just want to give it a try on the website, you can do so right away. But I think today we'll get a bit more hands-on, but this could still be a good starting point.
That's great. Okay, cool. So before we get started with the code, let me do a quick shout out to our captioning. We've got Jordan here with us today doing the live captioning from White Coat Captioning. Thank you, Jordan, for being here. And that is made possible through the support of our sponsors. We've got Netlify, NX, and Backlight all kicking in to make this show more accessible. We are talking today to Johannes at Schickling on Twitter. So make sure you head over and give a follow.
Thank you very much.
Talking about Contentlayer, which is contentlayer.dev. There it is down there. Find it. All right. So we've talked about why it exists. We've talked a little bit about what it's for. Now let's talk about how we get started. What should I do if I want to build my first Contentlayer site?
So Contentlayer is not sort of like the main thing. Contentlayer fits into like the thing that you want to build. So it's a piece of that. So in the same way as like Tailwind is not the main thing, but Tailwind fits into your next app, your remix app, etc. So you think about it similar to that. So I would suggest for now we'll set up a Next.js project, and try to use Contentlayer in that. Contentlayer, in theory, is agnostic to the site framework you're using, or to the content sources that you might want to use. Right now, Contentlayer works best and has like a first-class integration with Next. But in the future, there will also be other integrations and more content sources. So for today, I would suggest we'll use Next, and we use like some content like you've motivated initially with Markdown, etc., and try to build a little website there. And yeah, I think this you could use this for like your website, your blog, your documentation. It's really flexible.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to npx create next app at latest, and we're going to call this Next.js Contentlayer docs. Or are we going to use MDX today? I'm just going to give it a name that actually...
Yeah, we can even like mix and match. One decision we might want to make is whether we want to use TypeScript here or not. TypeScript is optional, but it still, I think, like unlocks like a nice aspect of it. But that's kind of like up to you whether you already see yourself as like using TypeScript by default or not yet, or never.
So I am happy to use it. Does it not? I thought it would ask me.
For the TypeScript part?
Yeah.
maybe you would need to maybe you would need to do,
Let me see if it
maybe there's like a flag or something.
did it set up TypeScript? Did they just go they didn't. Okay.
But I mean, we can also manually switch it, but maybe
We'll just
maybe check the docs whether there is like a flag for that.
yeah, we'll remove that folder and we'll try again with
There you
the
go.
here it is. There is a TypeScript flag. I thought it was going to ask me. Okay, so we'll go here, and then we're going to copy.
Again, it's optional. Works basically the same way, both directions. But I think it's sort of like demonstrates you some of the even cooler parts, in my opinion. But that's fully up to you.
Great. All right. So let me. I think we might have already installed. We did. So let me open this up. And now we've got a running site that I need to get init. Yes, I'm going to close this and open it again so that we don't have everything dimmed out on us. There it is. And so now everything is TypeScript. So we have a basic site, and I think we can just kind of declare bankruptcy and start all over again. So let me get rid of this.
That sounds great.
We'll do like Contentlayer plus Next.js. Maybe just skip a description altogether, and then this main will just empty out entirely and figure out what we're going to do next.
Right.
All right, so let's empty this out, get rid of the footer, and we are back on a just bog standard, nothing special. It's just a basic Next app. So I can run npm run dev, and that'll start this up for us. Oh, it set it up with Yarn.
I think that's either fine. Way should work now.
Yeah, it fixed the...
These tools have gotten quite good of like accepting each other's existence.
All right, so it's running. Okay, let me go fix that. So now we can come out here and localhost 3000, and here is our very basic hello chat.
Cool.
So what we wanted to do was set up like a basic doc site, right? So is there a special way to set this up, or like if it was me, what I would do is I would just put together like a content folder and start putting stuff in it.
Perfect. Let's do that.
Okay, so I'm going to create a folder for content, and inside of it, I'm going to create a new file called like index.mdx, and then maybe we'll have another folder for like getting started, and inside of that, we'll have like a step1.mdx and maybe a step 2, but this one didn't need any special components, so it's just going to be a regular Markdown file. And then inside of here, I would have like my title, and it would be, welcome to SuperTool. And SuperTool is going to be, I don't know, let's do like SuperTool is the next big thing in dev tools.
I was actually curious, like what GitHub Copilot would have suggested. What is the next big thing in?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's find out. In the SuperTool family,
I think this is a winner. No.
Okay, so we've got anyway. It's X for Y, and then we'll need to create some components, which we can do momentarily. But for now, let's take this. We'll come over to our step 1, and we'll say, like, getting started. Step 1. Step 1.
I think the entire developer relations industry is like coming to a close now that we have Copilot. Can just write documentation.
That's true. I should turn it off. Stop doing my job. So let's do, we'll do like a shell, and then we'll do like an npm install SuperTool. All right, so that'll be our step one, and then we can go to our step two, and yeah, I don't know. We'll have a step two.
There's actually a thing on NPM called Supertool, but it has
is it really?
0 weekly downloads, and it's published 5 years ago. But the more you know. Great. So this is our setup that you've like based on your intuition. This is like what you want to have. But now it's a question of like, how do you make it work? Like how that we go back to the browser and you want like the hello chat to display your content.
Right.
And ideally you want to have like some stylistic control of like how you like put it in a component, etc. And so that's an excellent starting point of like, hey, how do we make this work?
Mm-hmm. So we've got our basic docs here. And if I was going to do this now, I would start by Googling how to load MDX in Next.js, which would lead me to probably somebody's built a package for this by now that would let me, you know, maybe import them, or maybe I could put MDX in my pages directory, or maybe I have to, you know, get like import like read file sync from FS, and then in my, you know, export function get static props, I would need to like, you know, await read file sync, and then I'd have to go get my, you know, we'll kind of force this here, but do something like this, and then I have to like parse it, get front matter,
do all the things, and then like you might have like messed, like for example the way how you've written line 6 would already make sure it's not working on Windows. So there's like a lot of like little things that's very easy to like mess up. And yeah, these are all of like the things that you shouldn't really have, like the what you've done before. That's actually the meaningful work. It's like coming up with the idea, I want to have a content folder, I want to have like this format, etc. This is the stuff that's worthwhile thinking about and spending your creative energy on. But now all of that stuff is really like not unique to you. Everyone else has to figure this out, and you really shouldn't.
right?
So that's a perfect starting point for bringing in Contentlayer. So I think it depends on like now how you want to go about it. There is a first version of a getting started tutorial. I can also be your tutorial. So
let's have you be the tutorial. My favorite is to completely ignore the docs and just rely on you completely. But let's show everyone where the docs are so that they can find them if they don't have you looking over their shoulder. So you can go to...
fact.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The Contentlayer website, including the docs, is also built with Contentlayer. So if we wanted to, like, if we're now lazy and we don't want to like do all of this by hand, we could also just like look at the Contentlayer website repo and just see sort of like a more grown-up example. So we have some really cool things in there. So for example, you can even do Command K for like a search. So you can like write here Next.js, for example, and then you can like jump there to an example. Or so this is all built itself with Contentlayer. Yeah, this is one of these examples that doesn't work quite yet on all browsers, but yeah. So if you want to later explore a more sophisticated setup, the Contentlayer website and docs itself is built with Contentlayer, obviously.
All right.
So yeah.
Okay, so back to our hello chat here. So I'm assuming the first thing I need to do is install Contentlayer.
Exactly. So we would be just npm install Contentlayer. Given we're using Next.js here, while it's not technically needed, but it still provides like an even better developer experience with Next. We also want to install Contentlayer and Next-Contentlayer. So just install these two things.
Oh, Next-Contentlayer.
Yeah. So both content layer and next dash content layer.
Okay. And so we'll get those
and
installed.
I'm not sure whether it's just on my screen. I can't quite see the bottom of your terminal due to the overlay. I'm not sure whether it's the same for others as well.
Whoops. I squished it, everyone. I wanted to fix this for the aspect ratio and forgot that I have some of the screen cut off. So let me fix that. All right, so here is the screen. This is the command I ran. Was down here, npm install content layer and next content layer. And we have installed those.
Awesome. So there's now a few next steps we got to do in no particular order. So the first one I would suggest is creating a new file for that basically teaches content layer how to do things. So that's contentlayer.config.js or ts. For now, let's stick with TypeScript.
Okay,
Perfect.
And this goes in the root, right? This is kind of alongside your other config.
You could also configure it, but here that's good here. Given we're somewhat lazy, and that's at least how I do it. Like I rarely write everything just manually keystroke myself, but I typically copy paste and then adjust.
Okay,
that's what I would suggest now as well. So maybe we can jump over to the docs and getting started. And scroll down a bit. Yep. Scroll down a bit. So since we're doing it out of order, so scroll down a bit more, and we'll. So yeah, this is the one that we're now interested in.
Got it. Okay, so let's grab this, and then we'll look at what it does. So here is a config, and if we start at the top, I can see that we are pulling in define document type and make source. So we
you can hide the post so far and just So this is basically the entry point.
Okay. So we have a content dir path. Now I'm going to make a guess here that is going to be content.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay.
And that is really like the what's the important part about the content dir path. Doesn't matter quite yet here, but let's say you have a more sophisticated setup of different, like you have blog posts, you have documentation, you have like all sorts of different things. Then you might want to put them all into content or a different hierarchy. And this dir path is basically the root for that. Since like often you want to use the file path, like for example, that's here called step-1. Maybe you want to translate that to a URL later, so that this is like nicely relative to something. This is also what it's used for.
Love that. Okay, so then we have our document types, which right now we have a post set up. So I'm going to rename that, and oops, maybe not. Maybe I just want it to be this one and this one for now. We'll rename it to be, we'll call it page because they're going to be docs pages. And then...
Sounds good.
Okay, so I can make a couple immediate assumptions that my name is going to match. And then I'm not 100% sure what we're looking at here afterward.
Awesome. Yeah, let's look into that. And this example already contains a bit more stuff than we might need. But let's read through it. So this file path pattern is again like a mechanism that allows you to basically the files that you have available. Exactly.
Can I get away with this?
MDX or I think the syntax should be all right. Yep.
Okay. So for folks who aren't familiar with what I just did, this is the double star means like any directory and any file inside of that directory containing .md, and then the question mark after the X marks it as optional. So it can be Markdown or MDX.
Exactly. One thing that we need to do here additionally, since the original example didn't support or was not based on MDX, since MD and MDX are a bit more different than just a file extension, and there can be legitimate setups where you want to treat like a MDX file still as normal Markdown or the other way around. So we now got to also teach content layer which kind of Markdown flavor to expect. So for that, there is a field called, I think it's called content type. So maybe you can just, there you go. And notice there's also, if you hover over content type, there should be like some little documentation for it. So you see here defaults as Markdown. And so we can here just write MDX.
Okay.
And there should even be, if you mess it up and like write MDXX, this should even give you some, so this even gives you some help here that you mean MDX. Cool.
And it needs to be one of the document content types. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and now the next part, fields. This is, if you look to one of your Markdown files or MDX files, you have already here defined a title. So chances are that you have like some idea yourself of like, hey, I want to make sure there's like a title in all the MDX files. And if it's not, then my page will probably break. So Contentlayer here can help you enforce that. So with the required, you can basically make sure that it yells at you if you forgot about it. And we can like later see this in action, what that looks like. But you could also say, hey, it's not required. And then it's optional. And given that you later use your content as data in your site, this is going to come in really handy to have like, to trust like, hey, if I encounter a piece of content or a piece of data here, it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
It allows you to keep your site really clean.
And that's so nice because like one of my least favorite things to do is if we, let's say we had like page is one of these, and then you have to write these really complicated, like, okay, so let's get the title, which is going to be page.frontmatter. We don't know if that's set, and then we have to check the title, and we don't know if that's set, so then we have to do like a fallback, right? And like these are just hard to read. I dislike having to do this sort of thing. It's way nicer to be able to just
still mess it up because now you haven't done error handling before, so there is like a lot of things to like trip over.
Yeah.
So yeah. Computed fields, it might actually come in handy. Maybe you can just comment it out for now. But a computed field from a concept perspective is basically a field that you don't have to specify in your Markdown, but you might want to compute it so that in your site code it's already there and you don't need to construct it yourself anymore. So in this case, we're constructing a new property called URL. Where we are leveraging the file path, but we'll come back to that in a second, where it's going to be more clear. But yeah, so we can save that now.
Okay, so we've saved.
Perfect. So now we just got to take care of like a bit more setup just to integrate this all. For anyone later doing this, I would probably suggest you get started with one of the existing examples and just modify it to your pleasing. Because like then you already have guaranteed a working setup and you don't forget about something. But I think here it's fun to actually do it by hand. But so whatever suits you better, that's up to you. So the next thing is a little like basically to integrate Next and Contentlayer. That's typically done with a Next config. So if you go into the Next config, so here we just gonna, and you can like look at a tutorial. We're just gonna copy out some 2 lines there. Exactly.
Okay, and our next config was here.
This one above. And actually, so there's one special thing to consider. Here we're using not yet MJS but .js. So we gotta adjust the syntax here slightly. So here you gotta do const. Instead of from, you say equals require. Yeah, you know the drill. Okay. Perfect.
And then we're gonna wrap
and so
everything
just do
here.
Perfect. Yes. All right. And
clear that out.
And that's basically it.
Okay, so we've got Contentlayer configured. So this is what's this called? The provider pattern? Can't remember.
It's called like It's technically more of like a thing that emerged over time, and people call it the plugin. But really, it's just like something that adds a few more properties to next config here. And yeah.
Nice. Okay, and so that's really straightforward. Like whatever your next config is, just wrap it with Contentlayer. Great.
Nice. So the last thing is, since we're using TypeScript, and TypeScript allows us to make some of the imports nicer. So we're gonna basically now create like one of these import aliases or import paths. So please just copy the base URL and paths. Please maybe copy like since we also need the base URL part. Exactly. So you can add it after the incremental, since we're already here in compiler options. Just get rid of the additional compiler options. Line 17 is
17 compiler options. We're already in the compiler options.
Exactly.
I understand. So okay, got it.
Get rid of that wrapping. So that would be all. Like now we're gonna do one more thing, which is in the include. We also, so you can also copy that. We can add this part. And what this will make sure is that TypeScript, and therefore Next.js, really more help for Next.js than TypeScript, that this takes also registers like, hey, there's like content has changed, and that helps like the live reload. So setup should be done.
All right.
And we can now get started. So the way how you can like tell Contentlayer to do something, you can either do so manually using a CLI, but you would basically not do that unless you have a good reason to. But usually you just use it as part of Next. So it's already hooks into your Next stuff like very, very nicely. So you basically just now restart your Next.js server. And then we should at least, so perfect. So now let's stay here for a sec. Okay. So we have we are seeing some stuff here. So Contentlayer was loaded, and we now get some hopefully somewhat helpful error message already. So I think this has something to do with the glob syntax. I think the glob syntax does not allow for this question mark. Maybe it should. Maybe it's a thing to change. If you change that to maybe remove the X and make it like a star, maybe let's try that for now. Okay, so that it took. I agree, this question mark is kind of like a common syntax. It's probably, I'm using some globbing library. Maybe I need to add this. This could actually be cool if someone from chat cares about this and wants to create a GitHub issue, or we do it later. But this should be something that should be supported.
Okay.
But so now we see here three documents generated in Contentlayer. So we can now do one of two things. Either we're curious and we want to like explore what is the stuff that was generated, or we can like start using it, see it in action, and then do the investigation after.
Let's try it first, and then we'll go look at how you did it.
Okay, great. So the big cool thing about Contentlayer is that it basically reduces all of like this content wrangling into, for you, just importing the content. So, and this is basically the equivalent for something like Gatsby, where you have like GraphQL as a query language. Right. Here, import is your query language. So you just import, and then you just use it as normal data. So we import, and we'll we come back to the import what in a second, but we import braces from at Contentlayer. I mixed it up. Sorry, just Contentlayer /generated. There you go. Okay. And now you can in here like trigger the autocomplete. Exactly. So we have a few things here.
Oh.
And so besides the types, the actually interesting stuff here is like the all pages.
Okay.
So we have now all pages. And now it's really a matter of like how we, what do we want to do about it? Given we have right now, like Contentlayer itself does rather little in terms of how you use it in your app. So for example, the way how you do URL structures, etc., you rather solve that with Next.js. So it's unopinionated in that regard. So it rather embraces the patterns that your site framework uses. So for now, I would just say, let's not care too much about which page we're using. Let's just display something.
Okay.
So what we would do, and just for good practice, I would suggest you still root the all pages. We take care of that in get static props.
Okay.
Since at this path we're already reducing the data that actually gets built and sent around. So here we can just say page and all pages, and we just take the first one. Exactly. That's great.
So then
and
we're
now
gonna get
we have here.
page.
Exactly. And we probably want to make TypeScript happy. The next page part is you can probably provide a generic, or you can do it like this.
Oh wait, that didn't work. I
and
need to
page,
import it from here.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. And so if you hover here over
oh, now it's just not. It's just mad.
I think what you need to do is in after next page, I think you need to provide this as a generic there.
Like, wait,
and
no.
you got to wrap it into the object and call it like.
I'm very bad at this.
Okay, this is basically just to teach. Yeah, you got it.
Gotcha.
And now you can get rid of the second page. So yeah, the TypeScript muscles is like it's basically always the same thing, but you gotta get used to it. Yeah, what's cool is like if you hover over the uppercase page, you see already the data that you can expect. So
really
this
nice.
is already based on your point of like, hey, ideally I can just get started without reading the docs.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I agree, and one cool thing is that you don't need to go to the docs. Is you can just hover over this and kind of see, okay, what is the stuff that I'm gonna use now?
Really nice, yeah.
I think what would be cool is like as a first step is like instead of hello chat, we just replace the H1 with the page title. You got it. So I would suggest let's open the page. Okay, I think this is just.
I think this is because I didn't.
Hot module reloading.
Yeah. And I never reloaded the page after we stopped and started the server too. So we. Yeah. Okay, so we've got getting started step 1, and if I.
And so yeah, exactly.
Hot reload, and then now here's the other try. So hot reload it again. Let me go into step 1. And it hot reloads off the Markdown, which is dope.
There you go.
That's very cool.
This is like, can you survive without not having that? With like not having that? Okay, probably. But then when you really want to write that blog post, pressing reload like for the 50th time is gonna get so annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is a pain that I've dealt with in just about every project I've ever worked on, because I always get it in my head that I need to do something custom, and then that custom thing breaks hot module reloading, and then I don't have it anymore, and I'm like, I can live. And then I find myself just like that little bit of extra friction, and then this other custom thing I did that's a little bit of extra friction just leads to me not doing anything. It like, you know, it's I think you called it paper cuts earlier. It really is just one of those things. It's like those little points of friction that lead to you just saying, you know, I don't want to deal with that today. And then you never write, you never maintain things. You don't want to go in and do that. And like, whether you're an individual or whether you're a company, the points of your code base or your product where nobody wants to do the maintenance because it's just a little bit annoying, those are usually the points that end up being the things that start to make companies feel big and slow moving, and you know, it's the beginning of the end, right? If you're trying to stay small and responsive and excited about the work you do.
Exactly. And this is like I want to always like optimize for, if I have a good day and like I have like 30 minutes to write something, let me like have a great time getting the thing that I want to write out of my system, instead of like spending 20 of these minutes having a bad time, just like hating something. So here we just got, if in case we would just use normal Markdown, then we could just render it, for example, as HTML. We would also have the option to like deal with the Markdown ourselves again. But here we're using MDX, so we gotta do, if you really want MDX, then that's great. Like that allows you to bring your own React components, etc. We just need to do like one more setup thing.
Gotcha.
So we let me just look it up myself again. So you need to import something additionally.
Okay.
And that is import from next content layer for the MDX part. And here /hooks. And so here there should be a hook called use. Oh, sorry.
In here, sorry.
Now we gotta do the import. Yeah. Let's see what we got here.
I think I froze it. Hold on. What did I do? Oh boy, it's unhappy right now.
1 second. It's just use MDX component.
I wonder why it's unhappy with. Okay, here we go. All right. So then, does that mean that up here I can say like const MDX body equals use MDX component, and then I pass in the page.body?
Exactly. What body is a thing that contains both your root, the raw source code, and the MDX code. So we gotta go one additional step, code. Exactly.
Gotcha.
So, and now MDX body is just a React component that they can use, and
look at it go. And so what I have done here is duplicated my H1s because I put that in there. So what we're going to do instead is put the page title in the head and use the MDX body for the entire site. So just full control handed over to the Markdown.
But this is really up to you. So for example, the way how we build the content layer docs is that we say, actually in the docs content, never have like the H1 tag with like a single hashtag or whatever you call it. But we basically just have like H2 and smaller, and then use the title ourselves in the content. But that's really up to you. So yeah. So how are we doing in time? How much more time do we have?
We are doing great on time. We have about 20-ish, 25 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I think we can go a few different directions. So for example, we could now bring a Markdown, like a React component into our content, so that doing the full MDX thing.
Let's do that. So I'm going to create a quick folder that we'll call components, and then I'm going to do something not super intense. We'll make it like we'll do the, why not? Let's do the standard counter. So we will export what is the export function counter, and that's going to return a button, and that button is going to need an on click, which we'll define momentarily. And then when you click it, it will be clicked count times. And up here, we're going to do what? Like we can do a const count, set count, and use state. We'll start at 0. And then we need an on click. So a function handle click. And when you click, we will set count to be count plus 1. Like, cool, great, handled. So then we have this component, and then what I want to do is in here, I want to use my counter. And in order to do that, I have to import it.
Not quite. So this would be one
okay.
way, but that you don't have to do the import here everywhere. In my opinion, like the easier way to, there you go. It doesn't quite know about it yet. If you go to the to your index TSX, so you do index route, you basically pass it in there. So now you would basically, and when you call the component, you can basically provide here a property called components. And now it's basically an object. It's not an array, but an object. And now you pass in here counter.
Okay, so we're going to import counter from components counter. And then we will put our counter in here. And theoretically speaking,
boop. There we go.
Amazing. I mean, and like what I'll say about this and what is so nice about this is that we have in a very short period of time just solved a really complicated problem in like dealing with Markdown content. It actually, let me just show you the code for getting Markdown. Like I'm using MDX on the Learn with JSON site. And so if we dig into this and we look at the app here, I've got like the nested routes. And so then we get our, let's see, where's here's my MDX. So I'm trying to figure out like these, I have to do a wrapper for the page, and I've got my asides and all that stuff. And then when I come back out here, I've got, where's my content? It's like, we've got our routes, then we've got MDX, and then we've got something like this. And so, you know, we've got a lot of, it's just a lot of mess. And then on top of that, when I actually want to list my blog, which is, where is it? It's in here. I've got my blog page, which is a JSX page. And then I've got to do like this loading of my MDX, and like here's my blog index page where we have to like load all of our MDX. To load all of that MDX, I had to write a utility. That utility to load the MDX is here. And, you know, I'm reading file contents. I'm having to like parse a directory and get into like subdirectories. This is a lot of work, and this is not approachable for a lot of developers because, I mean, I have a lot of experience, and this was hard for me. I can't imagine for somebody who's like brand new to development that they're going to look at this and go, oh yeah, no problem. You know, but this, what we just did here does kind of feel like, okay, somebody who's pretty new, like that set of instructions makes sense. I can get the use MDX component and drop a list of components I want to be able to use into it. And that makes sense to me. I get that. This feels like a big deal. Like it feels like something that really helps in this sort of non-Gatsby landscape of using this type of content.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what I found interesting is when showing this to others, there were really was almost binary in that regard, that people who had that pain before, like yourself, like they're like, oh my gosh, I get it. This is amazing. I don't have to deal with like all of that crap anymore. But then people who have like haven't had that problem yet, they it's like, which problem does that solve? So I've kind of like almost called like pain driven.
Mm.
So when you felt that pain, then you get to appreciate it. But that's fine. Like when people get in a situation where they need to solve that, I think they'll have a very quick and easy time to understand whether this helps solve their situation and help
Mm-hmm.
with their setup. And one of the best features I think is like the simplicity, since it's really like it's not trying to do a lot, therefore it's easier to understand and it's not in your way. And you can just whatever you want to do, you can do in next, etc. So it really tries to be focused on sort of a small part. The other thing
Mm-hmm.
that I would point out, besides sort of like the developer experience that we've now experienced mostly, here we have a fairly small page setup. So we have like a few pages in your own blog. I think you have already like dozens of pages,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And like whenever you do like a file read, etc., your build times might go up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a larger project, for example, when we think about a documentation side, so for example, I think Gatsby has always had like really great docs.
Mm-hmm.
So I've tried to use Contentlayer, for example, on the Gatsby docs content itself, and as a benchmark for the performance aspect of it. Since can really like I've seen sites where a build can take like an hour, and that's crazy. Like you don't.
Oof.
This is an hour that it takes for you to make a change, and that your users get to see it. And this is where performance was always like very paramount for me. It can't just be great developer experience, but it's slow. But it has to be both. Um, so I have actually to kind of keep myself honest there and keep it transparent. Like if there's like a regression, I should know about it. So I've built a little benchmark suite, which right
Mm.
now just compares like three things. So if you want to go to the GitHub repo of Contentlayer, exactly, and you go one up to the org, and you go scroll down a bit, there is a benchmarks. So here, just illustrating a little bit the performance aspect as well. So here, there's like we have three setups. So one with Next.js and Contentlayer, one with Next.js and Remark. Remark is a common piece of the puzzle that you've illustrated before. It helps
Mm-hmm.
you with the parts, etc. And then for comparison, also Gatsby.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, if you scroll down a bit more, there's some of the current results. And so you see that Next.js and Contentlayer is the fastest for cold builds. So cold builds mean you're running build the first time, and there's not like a cache directory that it could use to be faster next time.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a warm build, this is typically where you'd also want to see some good improvements. So we've actually Gatsby has also just submitted a PR that improved their setup a bit. So
Nice.
I think their warm builds are very comparable and very nice. But I think the thing that's more relevant in our example here is the comparison between doing it yourself, for example, with Remark, and then
Mm-hmm.
using Contentlayer. And so you see, this is a relatively small example. You already see the difference here. But when it really goes into the like minutes and hours that it takes to
Right.
build something, this is where performance was always important for me.
And so this is 1,000 pages, but this is let's see, 1,000 pages. and we're
But they're
looking at
unique
a.
pages, so there's like no pages that are the same. It's still simple in that regard, that we don't do like a lot of like code snippets, embedded code snippets, or MDX, etc. So it's still just plain content, but there's still the big benefit, the big performance boost basically comes from not you doing for every route do like another file read, etc., but it basically just processes the content once, and then it just uses webpack, etc., for the import, and there can do tree shaking, etc. Whereas if you do it yourself, then there's really like the tooling can't really help you. It's just like code that needs to run, and if there's a lot of content, then there's a lot of code that needs to run and slow.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is very cool. And you can see here that like, this is, so for 1,000 pages, which I would say is a medium sized site, right? Like it's not even getting to a large site. Cause if you think about how many pages you're going to generate when you start looking at, okay, I've got all my content, I've got my docs, I've got whatever, like it's, it's not small, but it's also not huge. That's like 40-ish% time savings of switching from Remark to Contentlayer. That adds up. Like, and I know for me personally, one of the things that causes me to be the least productive is if I have like a 20-second lag between when I make a change and when I see the change, I will 100% end up on Twitter. And then that 20-second lag turns into a 20-minute lag. Right. So the ability to see changes quickly, to see builds go live quickly, it just, it's a game of inches, but man, it makes a huge difference when it's fast.
And so the cool thing is, one of the things that I haven't even built and released yet, but I've done some experiments, is where I can, like most modern computers don't just have one CPU. These builds right now for Contentlayer just uses one, just runs like in a single thread.
Right.
But I've done some experiments where I can parallelize things, which is not that trivial with JavaScript because you got to like do worker threads, etc. But I've done some experiments, and that suggests that we can probably speed this up by like 80%. So this could, in this case, like shave off like another 8 seconds from the build. So this can make performance wise, I have some good plans. And another interesting aspect is that the MDX parser, the folks behind SWC, they might be re-implementing some Markdown tools in Rust. And that could also really make things faster. Anyway, performance important for me, but let's go back to the developer experience side.
Yeah. I mean, they one only works with the other, right? Like the fastest thing in the world that's hard to use, nobody's going to use it. And the best thing in the world to use, but the output is terrible. People might use it for a while, but it's not going to last.
Exactly.
And so, let's see if we can, in our last 5-ish minutes here, I'd love to look at taking the pages and like doing a wildcard route for it. Like, can we generate the pages?
So maybe before writing any code, let's just explore this .contentlayer folder that's being generated.
Good call.
Since this is what we're gonna use a bit. So exactly, you're already poking at the right point. So you see here basically these 3 JSON files that are actually corresponding to our content. So and you see in here, you see the title, you see the body, and you see also some like other things like the ID and raw. And the raw already seems to contain a bit of that data that's going to be useful for us here. So you see this flattened path, etc. So this is what we're going to now leverage as our material to try to craft that experience. And really for the heaviest lifting we have to do here is rather working with Next.js or whatever you would be using to do the routing, and not as much on the Contentlayer side. So the way how I would typically go about it, so there's various ways to do it. I would probably do sort of like a catch-all route, at least for now. And so you don't actually need a separate route for that. So we can just repurpose the index.ts one.
Okay. Let's do that. So I will delete this one. We'll go in here and then remind me what the catch-all syntax is.
Yeah. So the syntax is a little bit funny. And there's various ways, but the one that I use, which basically means that we want it to act both as an index, but also as like any other URLs, is where you would wrap it in double brackets. Then you do ... and now you give it a thing like a name, for example, slug or whatever. So after the ... that becomes like a variable later. So slug is like typically what I use. And now, given that this is like a route corresponding not just with one page but multiple, we gotta also tell Next.js which routes there are. So additionally to get static props, we also need to implement a thing called get static paths.
Okay, and now this one, I believe, here's my, so we need to return, is it an object and then paths? And then an array?
I think so. And there's like two ways how you can do it. Either you render out the path as a string, or you return a thing that contains like an object with slug. But let's go with the strings first. I think this is sort of like the more intuitive way to think about it.
Okay, so we go
you're intuitively doing the right thing here.
Go map, and then we get the page.
Becomes data.
Whoops, we want raw, and then flattened path I saw was the one that did what we wanted. So this should give us, basically folder structure 1-to-1 is what our paths end up being.
Let's do one thing just for the sake of ease of debugging. Maybe you can factor out line 17 into a variable called paths, and then we just console log it. No, the entire line basically.
Oh, I gotcha.
And then we just console log it, since otherwise it can be a bit tricky to like know what's going on here. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. And there we can use the shortcut. And let's see where we end up now. So when we just open this in the browser, let's see what's happening. So we see some errors, but we also see this here.
Yeah, so we got our paths. It's unhappy with something that we did, and we end up with a 404. Okay, that's okay.
Right.
So we need to do...
Let's investigate.
What's the error? Get static paths is required for dynamic SSG pages. Okay, so that part we fixed. The fallback key must be returned from get static paths. That's okay. So then I need to add a fallback. And what's the... Just fallback false, right? If we just wanted to, just 404 if there's nothing there.
So this is basically about like the routes that are not there, etc. So, okay. This is to be honest, like also the part that's the hardest for me. And this is overall the hardest thing you need to do with like using Contentlayer. And it's not even about Contentlayer, but it's rather about like bringing together your content and Next.js. But we're gonna get through it. So if we look at the terminal output, we see here the paths that we should have available. So we have getting started step 1, getting started step 2, and empty string. So if I remember correctly, let's try by prefixing everything with a slash. Let's give this a try. Okay,
it doesn't
so
seem
this
mad
looks
anymore.
already better to me. There you go.
Okay.
So yeah, let's try that.
Okay, so it's not failing anymore. Let's create one that doesn't exist and make sure. Okay, so it's only finding pages that exist. That's good. But it's using the wrong data, and that's okay because we hard-coded it. So then what I want is it find?
Find, yep.
Yep, and then we'll find the page where the page raw Latin path equals slug, right? So,
kind of.
oh no, because
So
I got to do the prefix again.
exactly.
Okay.
And slug. So what I would suggest is like you also log out slug, just to get a feeling for like which ways does the next system give you access to things here. So perfect. So here we see slug
Oh, I
is an
see.
array.
Gotcha.
So what we should do is basically from that rebuild a URL string that we can compare.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's go with const. We'll go with page path, right? And then we'll do slug
Perfect.
dot map. And then
We can actually do a shortcut here.
Yes, please.
There is a neat thing called join, which basically takes the argument, the elements of an array, and joins them together. And what you can specify here is like the delimiter, right?
Okay.
You got it.
So
Perfect.
now we're building out like, there we go. And then if I put in the page path, that should get us closer. Okay, no error there. There's step 2. There's step 1.
You got it.
Oh, I broke my home
Okay,
page.
almost.
Undefined reading join.
Right. So this is the last case, and this is where routing is a little bit tricky. So here basically can happen that slug is not on the root page that's not there. What I would suggest, I found it most convenient to, when you deconstruct slug in the argument, just like make it default to an empty array. You would use equals, I think.
Oh, that's right.
So in this way, it basically, if it's not there, it's an empty array and still works. So what I think would be cool is for our little page here, have like a sidebar that's always there that gives us the right URLs.
Yes. Okay, so we can do that here. And for this, we would want, let's go with, we'll just do it as a list. So we'll do an unordered list. And then we want all pages.map, and that's going to give us a page. And for each page, we want to return, I'm not going to use next link because we've got like 1 minute and I don't want to get stuck here. So we're going to go with here, page, raw, flatten path, and then page title.
And we forgot the key to make React happy.
And so for that, we'll use page ID.
Perfect.
Wait, no, that's right. Okay. So now we have our links. Step 1, getting started. Step 2, right? So, ta-da.
There we go.
Not the prettiest thing we've
most
ever
beautiful
built,
page I've seen today, I think. But the content is there. So a few words on before we wrap up. One thing that you've done now is you've used all pages directly in your component while you saw that it works. It might actually, the more pages you can like rack up, now you basically bundle this content, this data in your app. So what you would want to do is you want to like trim it down a bit and route it through get static paths. So what you would do here, for example, like you really just need access to a sub part of that, so you can actually here build yourself a variable that has the stuff that you want. We don't need to do it now, but it's just worthwhile knowing. Yeah, and the other thing you saw now, like this path.
Can we pull the paths out of here? Like, can I just grab it?
Sure. Whereas we need more than the paths, right? So we would need to. Here is get static paths. We would need to do it in the get static props. But the other thing that I wanted to just cycle back to, we saw initially this computed fields part in our Contentlayer config.
Mm-hmm.
And you were wondering, hey, why do we have it here? And so with that, you saw like we repeated this URL thingy all the time. So with that, we can basically define it once. And so here you can just get rid of the posts. And now let's go back. And now we should basically just can do p dot, and see URL is already here.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get rid of this.
Right, and then we get very cool
URL here.
And it still works. Ta-da. This is cool stuff. Like, this is really nice. So Johannes, I'm going to send people to your Twitter. Where else should people go if they want more information on you?
I think Twitter is great. I'm like I've learned a lot of stuff over the last year, like how I've built Contentlayer, but I'm also interested in like various other things. So I'm increasingly sharing them on Twitter, and really enjoy talking to people like you to just share what I've learned with others. So I think Twitter is a good spot. And who knows, maybe in a few months or years, we'll have something other to talk about. I'm also currently building my own music app. I'm building sort of like a documentation platform for like every package on NPM. So I might have more to share on any of these. I'm kind of like living multiple lives in parallel, and find myself already having too little time.
Very, very cool. All right, well, we're going to call this one a success, y'all. Make sure you go check out Contentlayer, give it a try, and give feedback on that GitHub project. I'm going to do one more shout out to Jordan from White Coat Captioning. Been here all day doing the live captions. Very much appreciated. And that is made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, NX, and Backlight. Make sure you subscribe to the show. You can get the Google Calendar to see upcoming episodes, follow on Twitch, or subscribe on YouTube to make sure that you don't miss any future episodes. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. I'm not going to run through it today, but a lot coming that's not on the calendar yet as well. So please subscribe, follow Johannes, try out Contentlayer. Stay tuned because we're going to go raid somebody. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Jason. Bye.